Welcome to Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and with me is Raed Jarrar. Raed Jarrar is Advocacy Director for Democracy for Arab World Now. Welcome to Muslim Network TV.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me.
Walaikum salam and peace be with you. What in the world is this humanitarian corridor?
It's another disastrous policy by the Biden administration. It's not surprising. Unfortunately, President Biden has been supporting the Israeli attacks on Palestine and Palestinians since day one in office. So what he has done in the past month is not surprising, but it's very disappointing that he continues to give Israel a blank check policy, even when Israel is committing war crimes, crimes against humanity, killing thousands of Palestinians, including thousands of children, destroying Gaza with our weapons and our money. He's giving them a blank check with absolutely no accountability. So what we have heard from President Biden in the past few days made us even more concerned because he is supporting the so-called humanitarian corridors. And there is nothing humanitarian about these corridors. What Israel has announced last month is that they want to push all Palestinians out of their homes. Now, the official plan is to push them out of their homes from the upper half of Gaza to the lower half of Gaza. And of course, the bigger picture plan is to push them out of Gaza completely to the desert of Egypt. The plan is a war crime. You can't push civilians out of their homes. It's called forced displacement. And it's definitely creating what we Palestinians called Nakba in 1948, the great catastrophe of displacement that happened 75 years ago. It's creating it once again in our lifetime. So according to that Israeli plan, they created two different routes inside of Gaza where they are coercing Palestinians to take these routes to get out of their homes. And they're threatening them. Take these routes or you're going to be killed. Take these routes or we're going to consider you a terrorist. That's what the Israeli flyer said. So now President Biden is claiming that these routes are humanitarian routes. He says that it is something that he supports. And for the majority of human rights organizations, they have called these routes a war crime. Amnesty International, for example, condemned Israel's pressure to coerce Palestinians to leave their homes and use these corridors, ethnic cleansing corridors. Amnesty International called the ethnic cleansing corridors war crime. They called Israel's coercion a war crime. So I just can't believe that President Biden is touting these achievements, according to him, that he has created some sort of a magical trick for Gaza. It's not magical, it's not humanitarian. It is a part of Israel's big plan to ethnically cleanse Gaza.
Israel has been doing this for a while with different names, but humanitarian cause, people are asking for ceasefire, which nobody seems to be listening to. And then comes the terminology humanitarian pause and now humanitarian corridor. And you think this corridor is nothing but getting rid of Palestinians from their land?
100%. The Biden administration is supporting the Israeli government's ethnic cleansing policies under the disguise of humanitarian aid and support for Palestinians. The best thing to help Palestinians with humanitarian issues is a ceasefire. To stop dropping bombs to kill Palestinian civilians, their babies, their hospitals, their schools, their refugee camps. That is the best thing to stop the humanitarian disaster. This is not a humanitarian disaster caused by a storm. It's caused by Israel using our weapons. If Israel and the United States were actually concerned about creating a safe zone for Palestinian civilians, let them create the zone inside of Israel. That's a better place than kicking them out of Israel, Palestine to Gaza, to Egypt. So if there is a need to create a safe zone for Palestinian civilians, let them cross the apartheid fence back to Israel, where they came from originally. And that might be a good humanitarian gesture. But what we're talking about now is not humanitarian. I'll tell you one more very, very dangerous thing that President Biden is doing. In addition to this humanitarian corridor, humanitarian pause, he has asked for humanitarian aid from Congress last month. He asked for $100 million of humanitarian aid. But the humanitarian aid, according to the White House's request that was sent to Congress on October 20th, will be used for building infrastructure to welcome Palestinian refugees out of Gaza. So that is the use of the word humanitarian by this administration is very deceiving. There is nothing humanitarian about humanitarian aid to displace Palestinians out of Gaza. There's nothing humanitarian about a corridor that would make Palestinians leave their homes. There is nothing humanitarian about a pause that would facilitate ethnic cleansing.
Raed Jarrar, you are studying democracies in the Middle East, or the absence of it, perhaps. Do you think Egypt, the great Middle Eastern democracy, is going to welcome these people?
I mean, the Egyptian government is led by President Abdul Fattah al-Sisi, who came to power as a result of a military coup in 2013. A bloody military coup. He committed one of the most heinous crimes against humanity by killing more than 1,000 peaceful protesters in Rabaa Square. This was documented by Human Rights Watch, by major organizations, and he was personally responsible for giving the orders for these kind of attacks. I don't think many people in the region or many Egyptians look at this government as a democratic government. It's an authoritarian government led by a coup leader. But moreover, the government is very much reliant on the United States and Israel in existing. And that is very worrisome, because although the initial position for President al-Sisi was to oppose any movement of Palestinians into Egypt, everyone knows that if the price is right, this corrupt dictator would change his mind. And we saw Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, exerting a lot of pressure on al-Sisi in the past month. For example, Prime Minister Netanyahu met with European leaders to advocate that they pressure Sisi to accept Palestinians as refugees. Netanyahu also met with the World Bank, and he tried to persuade the World Bank to drop forgive Egypt for billions of dollars of debt, and return to Egypt, taking Palestinian refugees from Gaza to let them live in Sinai. So I wouldn't say that's a solid, ally there. I don't think that President Sisi is taking the side of Palestinians. I mean, if he was, he would have opened the borders between Gaza and Egypt as a minimum to allow in the aid and freedom of movement that everyone is asking for. So he is a partner of crime when it comes to Israel's actions, Israel and U.S. actions in Gaza, and no one can rely on him. That's why we have to say no to our government here. We have to say no to the Biden administration to continue its blank check policies supporting Israeli crimes.
It is late, but French president has called for ceasefire.
That's right.
Is there any significant Western leader who is calling for ceasefire now or joining him? He actually made an appeal of asking other leaders to join him.
That's
Is
correct.
he sincere? Is anybody else joining him?
We have heard very significant voices coming from all around the world asking for ceasefire and the end of hostilities. I think the United States finds itself in a very, very isolated position. We saw embarrassing votes at the United Nations Security Council, at the United Nations General Assembly, where the entire world voted to request to end the hostilities. while the United States and Israel stood there alone. And maybe, they had a few other nations, some islands in the Pacific, that are pressured by the United States to vote that way, but no major country around the world took the size of the United States and Israel. So the Biden administration is really depleting our country's national capital with these unreasonable moves. I mean, if you look at all the angles, the international community is saying no to more war crimes, no to killing more babies, no to the destruction of Gaza and the displacement of Palestinians. Even here in the US public, the American people are overwhelmingly against the Israeli attack on Gaza. More than 2/3 of the US public are asking for a ceasefire, including 80% of Democrats. What's even mind-boggling is that I saw that only 3% of the US public strongly support Israel's attack on Gaza. It's really mind-boggling to find that the Biden administration continues to support Israeli policies despite all of the pushback from the world, pushback from the US public, pushback from the administration itself. We saw resignations from the State Department, memos coming from the White House, from the National Security Council. The most recent one came today with over 100 staffers from US agencies in the executive branch, the State Department, USAID, telling the administration we need a ceasefire now. This is not me, not an activist, standing outside the White House. These are, officials in the administration, in the hundreds. In Congress, there were 400 congressional staffers signing a letter saying ceasefire now. Everyone is pressuring this administration, but President Biden continues his blind support to Israel, even though it's hurting our country, it's hurting his own administration. He continues to do it.
Well, Raed Jarrar, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Stay tuned for other programs at Muslim Network TV.